Yeah, my name is Troy Venon. I've been in information security and information technology for, I guess, the better part of 12 or 13 years now. I got my start in the Marine Corps. I didn't have any computer experience before that. I knew that I needed to do something that was marketable when I got out because it wasn't going to be a lifetime, thing for me. So I decided that computers is where the future was going to be, at least for me, and that's what I did. It was basically a natural progression from fixing computers and printers, doing trouble calls, into, well, they put me in front of a Cisco router and said, here, you need to make this work. We made it work, and then we're building networks out in the field in Australia, Korea, Philippines, all of that sort of stuff. And then the Marine Corps bought this device called a firewall. We called them DSIDs. They were deployed security interdiction devices. It basically was Gauntlet running in BSD. I'd never seen Gauntlet before. I'd never seen BSD before. They put a couple of us in front of basically a firewall and said, hey, you got to make this work. And we figured it out. And then they said, hey, you got to attach these IDSs to your network, and you got to make them work. So we did. And that's pretty much how I got into information security. And then, the last 4 years of my career was at what we called the McNOSC, which was the Network Operations Center for the entire Marine Corps. And from there, we were doing all kinds of interesting stuff, getting into IDS, IPS, intrusion detection, as well as incident handling and incident response, that sort of stuff. But the most interesting part of it, and this is really the reason and the deciding factor for me to get out of the Marine Corps and go into the private sector, was my last year on the Marine Corps Red Team, where we basically just went around the globe and hacked into our own networks. And we told them how we did it and how to fix it. There was nowhere else in the Marine Corps that was doing that sort of work except for the McNOSC. And it was a question of, do I stay in this industry, in this type of field, or do I go back to building servers out in deployed places? And it really was a natural progression for me to do that, to stay doing penetration testing and doing vulnerability assessments, that sort of work. So out in the private sector, I was doing that, doing red team assessments and blue team assessments and risk assessments, NIST, STAR, all that sort of stuff, until mobile devices started to become a reality. And again, that was just another natural progression for me. It was, mobile devices are going to be where the future is as far as computing goes. I believe when the iPhone hit, it was a very interesting concept. And if you think about the iPhone and the smartphone is just BSD with user interface slapped over top of it. Android is just a Linux kernel with a user interface slapped over top of it. So the question was, are there going to be threats there? And of course there are. I looked for that opportunity, and I found it in S-Mobile. And S-Mobile was really, I believe, founded in 2002, and they were really the only people in the world who were serious about mobile threats, mobile viruses, mobile malware, as well as the other threat vectors that affected mobile devices. So that's kind of how I got into doing this type of work. Now I manage what we call the Juniper Global Threat Center. The Global Threat Center started with S-Mobile, and it started when I came to S-Mobile because I have a CERT background, and that's what they were looking to create, was a CERT-style organization that focused specifically on mobile threats, mobile malware, those sorts of things. We'll talk a little bit about what the Global Threat Center does, but the reason that I'm here, I'm not really here to tell you about our product. I'm here to explain to you the threats that affect mobile devices and some of the things that you could potentially see in the enterprises that you're working in or that you're selling services to. Every enterprise today is dealing with users who want to bring their personal mobile devices into the organization. They want to connect to email. They want to connect into the enterprise and access services and data from their personal Android or their personal iPhone or their BlackBerry. And it's a reality. So we're going to talk a little bit about what those users could face as far as mobile threats go. Okay? And I usually leave the product discussions about what the Pulse Mobile Security Suite, what it does and how it protects the back end and some of the mobile device management capabilities. I usually leave that to the sales guys. I'm not a sales guy. Okay? I'm a guy that's looking at malware. We're reverse engineering it. We're writing signatures. We're out there in the world. We're trying to find malware We're actually doing penetration testing on mobile devices. That's the team that I manage. Okay, we don't sell stuff. We just really want to make the case that it should be sold. Okay. So the Pulse Global Threat Center, again, this is something that was started, I'd say probably summer of 2009, and that's when I joined S-Mobile. And our idea was we really wanted to create a CERT-style organization that focused only on mobile devices and mobile malware, okay? And that's what we do. We've got a couple of different teams, and I'll be honest with you, we have a lot of guys who kind of overlap in their responsibilities, but the first one is the malware research team. These guys are the ones that are writing scripts, and they're crawling third-party app stores, and they're crawling official app stores in the Android market with scripts and bots and automated tools that basically just scrape down as many applications and as many tools as we could possibly get from all of these places, from hacker sites, wherever we can get them. Okay, and then they also automate on the back end a lot of the initial analysis of these these applications to determine if something could potentially be malicious and if we need to take a closer look at it. That's what the malware research team does. They're responsible for identifying new malware that affects the device, as well as exploits and vulnerabilities that could affect a particular platform or particular device. The exploit resolution and integration team, those are the guys that, once we identify a threat, we need to figure out how we can best protect the device. An antivirus signature, if you think about in the PC space, is antivirus or signature-based detection really the smartest way to protect a device? Probably not. It's got its mileage and it's useful for some things, but for some things it may not. So these guys are the ones that are trying to determine whether a signature in our AV client is the best way to protect against this threat. Sometimes we may use other capabilities within the product to provide protection. The exploit resolution integration team are the guys that are doing that. Device analysis team, we actually have, I'm not kidding, we have a group of guys who sit around and they do fuzzing and black box testing of new devices or new platforms or new releases of platforms as they hit the streets. They are regularly fuzzing input services like SMS, MMS, Bluetooth, all those different services that you can receive data or you can communicate with on a device. These guys are fuzzing them and trying to figure out what an attacker may potentially be able to use to gain access to the device so that we can ethically disclose that information to the vendors so they can get them patched and fixed in a timely manner. Device testing team, that's basically QA. Those guys are the ones that are making sure that after we make changes to signature databases or SMS or spam filters or whatever they may be, that it didn't have some sort of adverse effect to the device. That's pretty much it. So why do we do this? Let me grab a drink of water real quick. Why do we do this? Sometime back in 2002, and this is, I believe at that point I was still in the Marine Corps, so I didn't know anything about S-Mobile. I didn't know anything about S-Mobile until about 2009, to be honest with you. But somewhere in 2002, when S-Mobile was built and when it was started, someone determined that users are interested in bringing their devices into the organization. So, we built a product around multiple types of devices and phones and providers gaining access into some sort of secured enterprise organization. Okay, we know that users are going to want to bring them in there. So that's one of the concerns and one of the challenges that environments are having. So we want to build a product around that. Multiple device owners. You may have a user who has an iPad or an Android tablet, as well as an Android device or a BlackBerry device. One user, I think, at this point may speak for 3 to 4 devices at one time, and enterprises have to figure out how they can control that access and how they can control those users and those devices. You have personal devices that are being used to access corporate data. I think BlackBerry and RIM, they had a pretty good answer to that issue with the BlackBerry Enterprise server, but what people found is, if you look at the bottom, what they found is those BlackBerry Enterprise servers were locking the devices down so much that users didn't want to use them. So they were bringing their personal devices in, and they were, so that they could do the things that they wanted while they could still access that information. Another issue that we're seeing is that everywhere you turn, whether it be in the news, on television, whether it be just in stores, everybody is implored to download applications from everywhere. The App Store, Android market, third-party app stores, whatever. Who's controlling that? Who's controlling the types of applications and the types of access that those applications can grant on the device? Well, at this point, nobody really is, with some small exceptions, and we'll talk a little bit about those. But these are some of the issues that enterprises are dealing with. Any of you guys dealing with these issues today in your environment? Okay, so you understand what I'm talking about. The question is, how do we protect those users, and how do we protect that data and those devices? So we did a survey, I want to say in 2010, and these are some of the statistics we came up with. You can read over them if you'd like to. One of the ones that's most interesting to me is in the middle on the very top. It says only 2% of users rely on their corporate IT department. At the time when we did this survey, only 2% rely on their corporate IT department to maintain the security of their mobile device. Only 2%. That means 98% of users, probably 90% of those 98% of the users don't really have any idea what security controls mean or what they're supposed to be doing on their personal devices. Which is interesting because 82% of them regard mobile security as a high or top priority. They want their devices secured, they don't know how to do it, and only 2% of them are relying on people who do to secure those devices. That's a pretty large, pretty large difference as far as, that creates an interesting hole, security hole inside any organization. You can read through the rest of those if you'd like, but those two are the ones that really kind of jump out at me. Mobile devices are mobile computers. I already mentioned it a little bit. iPhone is BSD with the UI, with the user interface slapped on it. Android is a Linux kernel with the user interface slapped on top of it. My Android device, I use the MyTouch 4G from T-Mobile. I have Nexus running on here. I have TCP dump on here, and everything else that you can imagine running on here. I can sniff traffic as I sit here over Wi-Fi, and I can capture credentials with applications called Face Sniff or Wireshark or whatever. I can do everything from this device that you guys can do from your laptops. Okay? They are computers, and people are using them more and more as computers. Sensitive data exists on these devices. User data exists on those devices. Proprietary data, sometimes intellectual properties on those devices, and a lot of times not even a passcode or not even a password is used to secure them. Okay? Anybody ever hear about this event that happened, I believe, in January of 2010, cyber shockwave? S-Mobile was a participant of this, and what it was is they took some pretty high-level government officials, and they kind of put them in imaginary positions, like Ken Chertal maybe was the president, or a bunch of people like that, and they basically just war-gamed some sort of scenario. But this particular scenario occurred, or what actually happened was a mobile malware infected a couple of devices that originated from Russia. And once it infected some devices, it reached out and it pulled down a large video file, okay? And it had the ability to self-propagate itself to other users in the environment, other users in the network, who would then reach out and pull down a large video file to the point that it clogged up the service provider networks, okay? And it brought down service provider networks. And then they war-gamed even further, saying that those service provider networks, when they went down, we started to see utilities go down, we started to see electrical failures, started to see all kinds of things occur. And in this wargaming, one of the things that they determined is the U.S. government really has no ability whatsoever to affect or really basically affect any types of changes. They can't really legally prosecute somebody for this type of stuff, and they can't really do anything about it. Okay, so the U.S. government is really, really behind the ball, and that's what this cyber shockwave event kind of showed. If you Google cyber shockwave, you can get some more of the details out of it. But what actually came out of this was, at the end of it, they had a big roundtable discussion, and they said, we're not prepared for this type of attack. There's no way. We can't handle it. We don't know what to do as a government. We don't know how to handle it. Something to consider. So, as the Global Threat Center, this is what we consider to be the mobile security threat landscape. These are the way that devices are affected inside an organization or a personal device, whatever it may be. First one is malware. That's an obvious one. Viruses, worms, trojans, spyware. The second one is direct attack. And when I talk about direct attack, I mean attacking a device interface, and that may be going specifically or directly at the SMS interface on a device. or browser exploits.